Well, hello everyone. Nice to join you here today. Before we start, just be good to know if you can hear and see me okay. As usual, just to know that everything's working well technically at this side. Just a thumbs up from a couple of people would be helpful. Terrific. Thank you so much. Great. Seeing lots of people showing up there in the chat box. Great. Well, thank you for joining us today from various places around the world. Oh, good. The year is rolling on so fast. The 1st of December here this morning in Australia. Some of you a little behind on that timeline. And 1 month till the end of the year. So after this session, Samaneri Jayasara will do one more in December, probably 3 weeks from now. And that'll be it for the year. We'll take a break over the summer holidays, our summer holidays here, winter for the Northern Hemisphere. But we'll let you know about that. So for those of you who may be new to joining us, we'll do a guided meditation for approximately 30 minutes. And then we'll open up the chat box for some Q&A. So we'll give a little time for people to log in and say hi. And then we'll close the chat box and open it up for questions for 5 or 10 minutes. Then we'll close it while I answer it and so on. While I answer the various questions. And we'll open again if I get to the end of those questions. So, as usual, wherever you find yourself, this is where our practice is. And, you know, that principle is regardless of time and place, no matter what situation, what conditions you find yourself in. Here and now is always the time and place of practice, of awakening, where the Dharma is to be seen and known. So it's not just on the meditation mat or in formal meditation practice periods. It really is, it is the opportunity in every moment of our life. So often our life, moments of our lives can be very challenging, and we feel like we have to get away from that moment to find a quiet place to practice. So in some cases, you know, you can say that that's right but not true, true but not right. It is helpful to be able to sit quietly and let the mind calm. That is an aspect of practice. Cultivating calm, learning how to let the mind relax. But ultimately, any real awakening is right where you are. It's not in any other place. So even in the most challenging situations, awareness, we're never bereft of awareness itself. And this we come to recognize more and more clearly as we practice in our lives. And that recognition of awareness is an immediate, if recognized, an immediate clarification, an immediate perspective on all situations. Why is that? Because as the mind clarifies, as wisdom emerges within your life, you see that awareness itself is never affected by the conditions that we meet in our lives. The topsy-turvy of life, the ups and downs, the ebbs and flows, the good times, the bad times. But it can take some time of practice to come to understand this clearly and to learn how to rest in presence, rest in awareness, and to trust that process. This is a place where insight can arise. So let's move into the meditation practice. We'll close that chat box, having let people check in, and we'll come back to that afterwards. So starting right where you are, we're not going to try to push anything out of consciousness or aim our attention in a way that we're going to fixate on any particular thing and try to hold that in mind. It's going to be a gentle exploration of our present moment experience. Now, there is the learning in meditation is initially coming to understand what's involved in the movement of attention, of intention and attention. These are two factors of mind that are moving all the time. We're often unaware of them. Attention follows intention. So for meditation, we have the intention to sit here or in whatever position you're in for a period of time, 25 to 30 minutes. And the intention also to recognize when attention is moving in a train of thought, thinking about the future or the past, i.e. not being fully awake to the present. And then to wake up in that moment, to recognize the movement of the mind in thought, attention sunk in thought constructs. That moment we wake up. So we're seeing, and the waking up is to this present moment, the relaxing out of thought, those thought processes. So this is a practice that we do to help interrupt that habitual stream of thinking, usually moving to our projected future, or often drawn into our memories of past, but essentially losing contact with present moment awareness. So waking up into present moment awareness. As I say, awareness has never gone away, we've just lost full conscious connection with it. So the waking up to full awareness here and now, relaxing out of thought processes, which are so habitual. So the one thing about meditation is we need some help to relax out of thought processes. So the gentle, after recognizing thought processes, we can use the physical sensate experience of the breath, sensations of the breath, or sensations of the body, the weight of the body sitting, to come back into presence. This is essentially what we're going to do now. Waking up out of thought processes, recognizing what's going on mentally, emotionally, connect with present moment sensations of the body and breath to help you relax in the present. So that's all that's involving is we're exercising intention and attention, very subtle aspects of mental of the mental faculty. So as we sit, I'll ask you just to become aware of the weight of your body, the feeling, sensations of sitting on the cushion or the chair, or if you're unwell and resting on a couch or the bed. You can usually become aware of the weight of the body where it contacts the surface of the chair or the bed. Or the cushion. And there's not just one sensation, we find a whole cascade of sensations bubbling like a fast flowing stream or brook. But as you connect your attention with physical sensations, the weight of sitting, the feeling of your posture, allow yourself to breathe in and out gently as you're aware of those sensations. So now you're aware of both the breath sensations and the sensations of sitting. You may be aware if you have any particular pain or tension in the body. Usually any painful sensations will draw your attention. So if that's happening, just allow that into consciousness, fully into consciousness. Aware of any tension or tightness in the body. And again, breathing with it. Allowing the full in-breath and out-breath as you're aware of those painful sensations, any tightness or tension in the body. And this is a very kind of open awareness. We're not trying to point the mind and focus it down. So it allows the body to relax as you breathe in and out in a relaxed way. Quite naturally, any held tension in the body should be able to open out and relax a little. And just let the breath be natural. It will go through its own cycles of being shorter, lighter breaths and longer, deeper breaths. It's very important to allow the body to relax and be fully conscious of that, as this cues the mind to also relax. relaxing with awareness of the breath moving in and out of the body. So for those who aren't used to this, of course, the mind's attention will jump in and out of that connection with breath and kind of get mixed up with thought processes. So that's okay. We just want to recognize that when it's happening. And when we do recognize it, that's the moment of awakening and relaxing out of that construct. You don't have to push it away, you just recognize thought, construct. And a gentle remembering of the breath sensation. So then that comes more to the fore of awareness. You can try to create a continuity of attention following breath sensation. Not by forcing, but again creating an intention to follow the movement of the breath sensation through the body as it comes in through the nostrils, expanding the chest and the lungs, the lower abdomen, and then the deflation of the abdomen, the lungs, the chest, as you feel the out-breath again leave the nostrils. So gently tracking those breath sensations moving in and out of the body can help us create this or allow this continuity of attention and awareness in the present. Allow the body to breathe by itself. Don't let the focus of intention and attention impose or restrict. So it's an open awareness. And this cascade of breath sensations in the present serve as a kind of anchor for our attention in the present. The sounds of the birds moving in and out of consciousness, they don't interfere with this attention to the breath. The same as any other sense impressions. They come and go. It can take a little while for the mental activity to settle down. So So just be very patient, an attitude of kindness, openness, patience. You're really learning how to plant yourself in this one spot through the sitting posture and open awareness. You get this strong anchor with the breath sensation, body sensation, so as attention doesn't run off too far away. It just notices the various impressions that come and go. But this sense of centering and becoming centered through the posture and following the breath really helps to bring some stability. So whatever's happening in your own experience, that's just how it is right now. You don't have to struggle or fight anything or get rid of anything. Simply be aware of what the present experience is. Learn how to rest, relax the mind and the body through this tethering, gentle connection with the movement of the breath. Every time you become aware of tension in the body, in any way, shape or form, keep relaxing as you breathe out. Just relax it out. It's often just habitual tensing and armoring that you detect through present moment awareness. And we just start to notice the habitual movements of mind. Of course, mind moves back into thinking. It's its usual habitat, attention moving into thought processes. But learning how to recognize when that's happening is the point. And when we do recognize it, seeing what happens there. That recognition actually stops the thought in its tracks. It dissolves the whole construct for a moment. Very important to see that, to recognize that in itself. The re-emergence of non-thought, empty awareness, or non-conceptual awareness, even just for a moment. Now, often our attention is pointed outward to sense impressions, including thought as a mental sense impression. And it seems as if this attention, it's like a radar, kind of always waiting at the sense door of the mind to pick up on something, to see if it's interesting or desirable or whatever. So just notice that sense of looking or seeking outside of the mind. Looking the pointedness of attention to the environment, let's say, but oriented to the outside. And if you can recognize that at any point in time, explore, see if you can find a way to let that pointedness or direction of attention to open, to relax. In other words, and these are just words, but allow the pointedness of attention to merge in open awareness itself. Undirected, relaxed. Actually, it's not something you can really do. It comes about through noticing the pointy end of attention pointed outwards and just relax the searching, relax the seeking. And don't be concerned if this doesn't seem possible to you, or that you don't even know what I'm talking about. Just notice if there's any stress or concern appearing. See how it affects the body and mind. And let it go. Breathe out. It doesn't matter. It's okay to not know. It's okay just to be as you are. So noticing what's happening for you right now, mentally, physically, emotionally. And just let it drop. No need to hang on to it or work it out or analyze it. Just see it disappear in the recognition, in the seeing, in the knowing. And take one or two deeper, fuller in-breaths as we're going to come out of this meditation. And in your own time, you can re-enter the shared space of this internet connection, and we'll open up the chat box for any questions that people may have. So that was about a half-hour meditation, and I know I talked through a little bit at the beginning, at least, just to help you settle, but it seemed to go fairly quickly from my end. I'm just scrolling through the chat. I think there was one or two questions that came in earlier. Wendy is asking, she said she'd love it if we could explain dependent origination in a Dharma talk. And Jani saying, isn't that interesting how what is right and what is true doesn't always line up? There's a few good questions. I notice my mind clings harder when I try to let go, as if falling into a void. The natural response is to grab anything. That's right. So just knowing that is interesting, isn't it? I'll come back to the earlier questions, but noticing that when you suggest or it's suggested to let go, in a way we try to do it, as an instruction, we try to do something, whereas letting go is really just a moment of relaxing, of seeing the clinging, and in the seeing, recognizing the tension or the tightness. Just if you look at a closed fist or holding something really tightly, that's the clinging. But when you see it, what can be recognized is the unnecessariness of such a tight holding. It doesn't have to be like that. It hurts, right? So the letting go is, can just relax. So you don't have to throw away the object or try to let go, let go, let go. It's and I don't actually need to hold this glasses case up. I've got my glasses on so I can put it down. So there's an understanding that occurs that the initial letting go is just releasing the tightness, the tension, the stress, which is the unnecessary component. But if it's something we have to still engage for a purpose, we can engage it without clinging. If it's no longer needed, it's put down, rested out of. That's the general idea. But as you see, it does take practice, because it's a habit of mind, for whatever reason, we call it spiritual ignorance, to grasp. And this is just the situation we find ourselves in. when we look at the mind, when we look at the cause of suffering in the moment, this is what we see. And this is what the Buddha pointed to. But this experience of suffering and the cause of it has to be fully known directly. If you don't know it directly, if you don't see that hand is held so tight and for no apparent real reason, it's just the habit of clinging, then the letting go can happen. But there is fear sometimes, as you say, because we're used to holding on, we're used to attaching to one thing or another, be it the body, thought processes, emotions, mind. We've learnt to find identity. We identify ourselves with that. And so in the letting go, the ego mind, the ego construct, thinking that is me or mine or is really necessary, you might experience a moment of fear. Not everyone feels that fear, but it can come up in different ways. Recognizing that's very important and breathing through it, breathing beyond it. Letting go is a bit like when you're learning how to swim and someone takes you out into deeper water where you can't stand and you don't want to let go of them because you don't feel like there's anywhere to hang on to and it's not familiar. But gradually learn how to let go and you realize if you're not frantically splashing around, the body floats, or you learn ways to tread water. You start to understand the nature of water and the nature of the body, the nature of movement, and you learn how to keep yourself afloat. But if you relax and just lay on the surface of the water, because the natural oxygen, air content in the body, you float. The buoyancy of the water. So it's a bit like that, learning how to let go and realize in the falling, there's no falling, there's a heldness, and that's the refuge. That's what's a felt refuge. No one to fall, nowhere to fall, no thing to fall, there's just abiding without clinging. So that's the possibility, that's the full cessation of suffering is finding that abiding without clinging. Until that's fully found and fully trusted, fully rested in, we have moments, we can experience moments of that. And this is the path you'd recognize within what I just described, the Four Noble Truths. So I hope that helps. And in a way, that was to someone called Don't Know, the Don't Know mind. That's the pointing. And it is true, there is a bit of a saying that we'd rather hang on to the suffering that we know than let go into the non-suffering that we don't know, or where the mind doesn't grasp. It can be experienced as a kind of a not knowing because it's non-conceptual. But we gradually learn how to recognize that's the refuge, the ever-present refuge. And there doesn't have to be the grasping at knowing of something. And the earlier question, Wendy, it's very difficult to explain dependent origination in a brief way. So you say in a Dharma talk, perhaps at a future time, I can do it more specifically. But the dependent origination is probably the deepest and subtlest teaching that the Buddha gave, but it is the backbone of his understanding and his awakening. But to say this much is that it is understood and explained somewhat differently within different traditions, and sometimes even in the same tradition, different teachers may have a different way of explaining it, particularly certain aspects of it. But just in what I was talking about in terms of that question around clinging and letting go, actually what that territory that I glossed there is the territory of dependent origination. You know, the suffering through clinging is present due to ignorance. Ignorance is the first causal factor in that chain of dependent origination. It's, which has 12 components, from ignorance as the first component to old age, sickness, death, suffering, sorrow, lamentation, pain, grief, and despair as the 12th component, from ignorance to suffering. Without ignorance, there's no suffering. When clinging is abandoned, when clinging finds that place of letting go, that whole chain of dependent origination from ignorance to suffering is opened, is relaxed, is cut through in a moment. Now we can explain dependent origination, the causal links from ignorance to suffering, in, say, a linear time process, causal aspects leading to things arising in linear time, and also what we call synchronic time, like in the moment. As Ajahn Chah said, seeing dependent origination unfold within your practice is like it happens as quickly as falling from a tree. As you fall from the top branch, you see all the branches when you hit the ground. From ignorance to suffering is just like that. Or when the system breaks open, when ignorance is uprooted or usurped even for a few moments, when clinging is relaxed, when craving opens out, ceases for a moment, that whole construct collapses. So that's the synchronic experience of the ending of suffering, the usurping of ignorance. But yeah, so a quick request, you say, but to explain it properly is quite a feat. So I will take your suggestion and perhaps address it in a full Dharma talk at some point. But in the meantime, you know, there's lots of good stuff. I would suggest, and you can download this book from the internet by Venerable Pra Payutto, Payutto. He's a Thai scholar monk. He may have passed by now, but he wrote a very good book, I think literally just called Dependent Origination, which is really well worth reading. I mean, I could never give such an eloquent Dharma talk as his explanation. It's a smallish book. It's not, and it's in a really easy to understand, translated into English in easy to understand way, if you have already a sense of the Buddha Dharma. So by Phra Payutto, Phra Payutto, Payutto, Dependent Origination. Free download of the internet, you'll find that. Yeah, so just a quick comment with Jenny, right but not true, true but not right. Now this was something that Ajahn Chah was fond of saying, but there was such wisdom in it. You know, anything that we might declare, any view we might have, even if it's a right view, if there's clinging to it, it becomes wrong. Yeah. Or if we're stuck to a particular view about what is right, even if in the conventional sense it seems right, it becomes wrong. And something that might seem wrong to us may be right in some other circumstance. So he's pointing to the very conditionality of things. There is no absolute right or wrong, which can be challenging to think of. There is a right and wrong within the conventional sense, particularly when we talk about harm, the intention to harm versus non-harm. But everything is conditional. Things arise out of a set of conditioned circumstances. So this is where it becomes very complex. So where things can be right, true but not right, and right but not true. When following the wisdom of the masters, I don't understand some of the spiritual vocabulary used. Why do some masters resonate more with me? Well, that's true. Look, spiritual vocabulary is culturally conditioned. So, in our current world situation, we've got a bit of a melting pot of all the different traditions, all the, across the board, not just all the different traditions and ways of speaking within the Buddhist world, but beyond, to include all the religions of all the world and all the different ways of speaking. This is what we call conventional truth, right? So this is an example of maybe right but not true. Something within, say, a Christian paradigm with a certain vocabulary might be pointing to the realization of, of God, of the ultimate truth, but set in particular words. So the essence of that realization may be true, but the words may encapsulate it in a certain way that it limits it. So it doesn't, not necessarily right, absolutely right. So we can talk about this within any tradition. And stuckness to that is this is the only way, or it must be explained like this. That's very flexible. Words of different cultures, paradigms and language, the ways of explaining things, the memes that develop within each culture doesn't necessarily translate to another culture. Even with all of our Google translation, So this is what we call just, conditioned reality and the limitations of words and descriptions. So we use words in whatever cultural context. We're using words and concepts in everyday life to communicate. But even within our own culture and within our own language constructs, how much misunderstanding do we have with each other, right? Even people I live with and the things we understand, we have the same language, we have the same kind of conditioning, but communication isn't always a sure thing because the mental processes are very conditioned and perception is quite biased and conditioned, and our own mental emotional processes, kind of interfere with the hearing of things. So this is the very root of suffering. The mind is constructing various things in a conditioned context, trying to get a sense of what those words mean or are pointing to, but it can be misconstrued, or it may be recognized, and there may be understanding. So if that happens even within our own families and close relationships within our own culture, how much more when we try to communicate, cross-culturally, and not only cross-culturally in current time, but cross-culturally with ancient words coming from more ancient times where, the cultural context and the psychological constructs were probably quite different to ours. So there's a lot with the words of the masters, coming back to your specific question, there's a lot that can be misconstrued, and the languaging develops within a particular cultural context. So we have the translators who do their best to put something into a language that we understand, but even so, they're often foreign concepts. So it can take quite a while to unpack the jargon. What is it pointing to? But this is where our practice and our meditation is really important, and the inquiry. The masters are always pointing to reality, something that's true, in whatever words they describe it. We have to do a bit of a translation process to understand what is that pointing to within my own experience. Not to misconstrue it, but as a contemplative investigation. And as you say, you resonate with some more than others. It may be the ease of the language or the concepts through which it is being conveyed, most certainly. And a lot depends on the skill of the translator. If it's merely an academic translation, then the gist of the real meaning can be glided over. It doesn't really sink in. I find often if it's a translation from someone who's a practitioner and they're very skilled at their work, they've done it for a long time, then essential meaning can be conveyed through the language they choose in a more concise and direct manner. So we've got all these different factors to, language is like it is a construct. It is like a vehicle that conveys the meaning, and even meaning in itself is a construct. But the essence of the meaning, when it points out the truth within your own heart, is the whole point of that communication in the first place. The aha moment, right? And that aha moment is essentially conceptless. This is the irony that we use concepts and words to point to truth and to help say relax the body mind, or bring the body mind to a place where it can perceive that truth or understand what's being pointed to. But in the moment, mental constructs, and all conventional reality, the essence is not dependent on that. So this is the Zen saying, the words and the concepts are like the finger that point to the moon. They're helpful. The moon, as an example, as a metaphor for the reality, ultimate truth. The finger is the conventions or the methods, the words, descriptions used to point to it. But if someone's vision or attention just gets stuck on the finger, that's not the truth. It may sound true to you, but unless you lay your eyes on the moon, the metaphor for recognizing ultimate reality directly within your own mind and heart, then if we get stuck on the concepts or the words, we fail to realize what they're pointing to. So it's very important for us to keep remembering that the words, concepts are all culturally conditions. They're vehicles, they're packages that are meant to point to something, to help us see something in this moment, in our very own reality here and now. And you will resonate with some more than others. It may be you may have karmic connections with a particular mode of practice or a particular language or a particular teacher. Whatever you feel more resonant with, then you can use that as the support for your practice of awakening. And quite naturally, if we don't resonate with something, it's not something we turn back to. So yes, if you find something you resonate with, allow that to provide pointers for you. And maybe later down the track, other things which you didn't connect with earlier on, as you become more experienced, as you learn more what's going on, what this body, mind, the conditioned and the unconditioned is about, other forms and other language may speak to you as well. So the path of practice is ever evolving in that sense, or let's say our wisdom mind is ever expanding in that sense. So that long-winded way of trying to respond to your question. I hope that was helpful. Sometimes words just get in the way, and that's why many teachers just teach in silence and also prefer the method of direct transmission, not relying on words so much. But I hope that's helpful. Okay. Should we intentionally go into digging up past hurts, attachments in order to uproot them, or let things come up naturally? My advice generally is to let things just be there naturally, because they will emerge from time to time. So just work with what appears naturally. Anything that we're stuck to that may have occurred in the past will definitely reappear if that's the case. Now, I may be contradicting myself, because in some meditations I've done on working with challenging emotions, I do invite people to bring up, if they're not feeling, the one working on resolving anger, if they're not feeling anger in the moment, listening to that meditation, I do invite people to think of something that typically stimulates their, sense of outrage or anger, just to work with that. But I wouldn't necessarily advise that as a matter of course. It may be that there is something that, say, for example, you do get triggered, say, by a particular person or a particular thing that happens. It may be that if you finding that difficult to work with in your daily life, it may be that you do sit down in meditation when you have some time and explore the emotional resonance of that. So that may require that you remember what happened, but it usually wouldn't be that far away. Perhaps in that case, if you're really stuck on something that's recurring in your daily life, like resentment or anger or reactivity, then that's a way you can explore it in a safe situation when you're alone, just sitting, but not as an analysis, but as just looking at the impact of that in your heart and mind, and breathing with it, listening into it. And the inquiry is really about relaxing the reactivity and, what I was saying earlier, seeing ultimately where the clinging is in order to breathe through it and just relax it out. And understanding about that reactivity will emerge, intellectual understanding will emerge as a matter of course. So it's best not to think about it too much in your meditation, but just feel into the resonance of it and listen into it. What is the role of emotions in study? No particular role. We are emotional beings. We have emotional responses to things. So, as a matter of course, our mind states, our emotional states will be part of our meditative process. And so becoming aware of the emotional state at any particular time, learning how to breathe with that, whether it's pleasant or painful. Just as all of that instruction in the meditation, we recognize what's present. And with that recognition, awareness of what's present, we have far less of a tendency to react and to act out of ignorance, to react out of, just emotional reactivity. So there can be a mind state, say, you can recognize that the mind is currently influenced by aversion or anger, if you like. You can feel tension. And with that awareness, you're far less likely to act out of it. And if you're able to sit with it and breathe with it, you can actually relax, or that mind state can disperse in a much more healthy way. If we're not aware of it, that's ignorance, not aware of it. It will influence everything that comes into our mind stream. If you wake up in a bit of a bad mood, if you don't really become aware of that and release yourself from that, know how to relax out of that to some degree at least, then everything that enters your mind, thoughts, encounters, is going to be tainted, stained by that mind state, as long as it is unseen. And so a lot of, unwholesome karma, or we can become very reactive if we don't address that, the presence of aversion, for example. So awareness is the most important thing. Doesn't mean you have to get rid of it if it isn't dispersing naturally, but awareness of it. And if it is anger or aversion, a good degree of caution and space in your responses until it can be dispersed. Sorry, I lost my place here. Okay. Reverend Dillis says, I'm 61 and there are habit patterns of mine I've had for 50 years, deluded patterns. It can be hard to see this as delusion because the habit has become such a part of me. That's right. But the more we sit with awareness, this becomes, it gets revealed. You have awareness of it already just within the question. You have awareness that there are certain habit patterns you've had for 50 years. So you seem to backtrack to age 11. But there's awareness of it. And maybe not a full awareness of all of them, but there is awareness. And, in this process, in this path, our personality has developed in a particular field, has been conditioned in a particular way. So we're not going to become blank slates. And it's really interesting to read the suttas. There were so many different characters, enlightened disciples of the Buddha. They were all very different characters. The personality characters weren't didn't become completely neutral. They weren't all the same when they awakened. So still the conditioned personality factors, but the idea is we come to know exactly how they are and how they operate, and it helps us operate in the world. So, but we know the sticky parts of them in a way. We know our tendencies, and we learn to cling less and less. The clinging is the I making, my making, me making. That's the delusion where you really think this is me, this is mine, this is what I am. That's what delusion does. But when you see this is just a conditioned factor of mind or body, even emotional responses, these are just conditioned factors. They come and they go. That's the non-clinging. When you see that clearly, they come and go by themselves. And when you don't cling to them, there's no reattaching, saying, this is me, this is mine, this is what I am. There's no belief that this is really me and mine. You see that they're impermanent, they're changing, they're conditioned. They're not really who and what I am, but they form part of this conscious experience. So they become more and more transparent in that sense, in that they don't stick so much. Your mind doesn't stick to them so much. So they make more fleeting appearances. They may create the shape of how you express yourself. But, if someone objects to that, or you don't like something about yourself, it's just that in the moment. It's nothing more. No one's taking it personally anymore. That's the end product of non-clinging. When you see the I making, my making, me making process, you start to see through it more and more and more. And that's where the unnecessary experience of suffering is. So that's what can be released. So conditioned personality is what it is. It becomes more refined as quite naturally within the process because of your emerging wisdom, natural wisdom and compassion. So the choices you make are based more on wisdom and compassion rather than ignorance and clinging and neurotic activity. Yeah. Neurotic narcissistic activity. This is really me. Thank goodness there's the ability just to drop it. So I hope that helps, everyone. The kindness we learn to show to ourselves in this practice is what we're gradually learn to use in the outer world, the situations we encounter. Absolutely. Everything you learn within this practice, the kindness, patience, compassion, expansiveness of awareness is exactly what is engaged in all situations, internal or external. Very good. So much like Reverend Steve says, I've spent 60 years habituating to the me defined by others, parents, teachers, bosses, friends, all telling me what I am. Lots of practice. So I realize it takes a bit of practice to unlearn. Absolutely. And we're all in the same boat there, Steve. I'll just tell you a little story because it was a significant moment in my life. When I was 15 and a half when I left school and went to art school. And I think it was possibly on the first day of art school, within a little group gathering, I think signing up for a particular drawing class. And I had this, what emerged was a wonderful sense of freedom there was some clarity there, a sense of freedom, and which was just wonderful. And I looked, I thought, what's that about? And I realized in that moment, there was no one here in this room who knew me, and I didn't know them. So in that moment, I experienced myself. Perhaps it was a moment of recognizing not self. I didn't feel limited in any way by who they thought I was, or me as relating to these other people in my life. There was no knowing. So I guess that was perhaps the first moment in my life, apart from that moment of being born. But even then, there was familiarity with my mother, having been in her tummy for 9 months or more. But this was the first moment in my life where I didn't have any of that relational set pattern. And it was so freeing. In that moment, I also realized how much the sense of self is a relationally conditioned sense. Not only with regards to the people in our lives, we develop patterns of relationship which kind of mirrors back to us who we think we are, and vice versa. We project onto others who we think they are and how we think they see us. It's a bit of a hall of mirrors. But also our relationship to ourself. In that moment, I realized that all my perceptions of who I thought I was dependent on those relations, those relational perceptions with regards to the people I knew or thought I knew. In that moment where there was no one, there were people in the room, but it was all new to me, all new people. And I experienced, a few moments of wonderful freedom and not self. Freedom of not self. So I guess I might have been a Buddhist before I met Buddhism, or had some previous connection to Buddhism. I didn't think of it as not self in that moment. It was purely non-conceptual, but that was the experience, the freedom of the limitations of self in a dualistic sense, in a relational sense. And within that, there was, if I look back, that freedom was expansive awareness. No conceptual limitations, of no selfing going on. And as you point to the relational, how that selfing is trapped in relational perceptions. So this is all perceptual. You don't have to get rid of those relationships to free yourself from, or experience freedom from, selfing, I making, my making, me making. This is a perceptual process. It's a conditioned process. So, as I said in the meditation, just seeing that in the moment can be the freeing moment. As you know, sometimes our most challenging relationships are with the people most close to us, and those we may love the most. We may have moments of real difficulty, which seems like an irony at some level. These are the people I love the most, and yet I can feel most hurt, or I can become quite hurtful within that relationship. But this is all perceptually based. We in relationship, we do get locked into patterns, and we project as much how the other sees me, and how we think the other sees me, and how we see the other and what we expect from the other to reinforce of me, my good me. I don't want them to reinforce or reflect my, not good me, or the shadow me, or the me that I don't want to see. however you want to put it, becomes quite psychological. But just waking up to where we experience that reactivity, where we experience the limitation, the sense of entrapment, this is the first noble truth, the experience of suffering. It is just conceptual and perceptual in that moment. And if we can see that and learn the relaxing out of it, to not believe in those perceptions and concepts, to recognize their conditioned moments, breathe with it, allow them to move through as clouds move through the sky, and you find the freeing moment on the other side. So this is the practice, Steve. But trust me, we're all in the same boat there. And perhaps what I said right at the beginning of this practice period, I said, the freedom of awareness is always here and now. So you don't have to try to get rid of all these concepts and perceptions and analyze it all out of the picture in order to experience freedom. The most direct way is to recognize that free awareness, which is already present in and of itself. All perceptions and concepts are mental processes that appear and disappear. And ever-present awareness is like the vast empty sky wherein these clouds and shifting dynamics come and go, or birds flying through, squeaking and squawking. But we haven't learnt to recognize that free awareness that is ever present. So that's the most direct way to find that free space. And then, as I said, the things flying through the sky of awareness, they're brief visitors. Even in the Dzogchen tradition, Mahamudra, they appear as a moment of limitation or stress or suffering. As soon as we recognize that, it can be released, or we recognize the already free space of awareness, that stress disperses. So this again is all the territory of the Four Noble Truths, which is the same territory of dependent origination. The Four Noble Truths is like the practice map of that territory within your own experience. And whilst the dependent origination paradigm can be seen to unfold within those Four Noble Truths, the way we describe it, it's perhaps more of a philosophical expression of the middle way. But nevertheless, it unfolds within that territory of the Four Noble Truths. Can you please describe your own take on three characteristics and how it plays a fundamental role in our everyday life? So I'm presuming you referring to the three characteristics of existence as impermanence, unsatisfactoriness, and the not-self nature of conditions. In Pali, it's anicca, dukkha, and anatta. So I think you will have recognized that I've been talking about that in response to all the previous questions, in fact, that the wisdom, whether in meditation or in everyday life, is seeing the fleeting nature of conditions and appearances, whether they're sights, sounds, smells, tastes, sensations, or mental movements of thought, perceptions, images, emotions, this kind of thing. To recognize that they're all fleeting is seeing the characteristic of anicca, all conditioned experiences. And by conditioned, we mean all experiences that come to be because of other causes and conditions. They're conditioned in that they have no essential permanent essence of their own, essential lasting essence. Things come into being because of other conditions. And this is the territory of dependent origination as well. Conditioned arising, the conditioned arising of things. Everything that is born, it comes to be through other causes and conditions. And as those causes and conditions themselves change, because they're all in a flux and flow, so the conditions arising from them are changing in flux and flow. Whatever is born dies. Whatever appears disappears. Whatever comes goes. This is the pattern. So seeing this within your own experience is seeing the characteristic of anicca, impermanence, of this mental, physical process. Seeing anicca, you also naturally see the dukkha, the stress aspect. As I said, anything that's clung to, wherever there's clinging, craving and clinging, and ignorance, because that's at the root of craving and clinging, there is this grasping. And this is where the stress is, in ignorance, craving, clinging, and the various things it gives rise to. But when we see that, and we see the unnecessity of that, it can be relaxed. That's wisdom, that's Buddha knowing the Dhamma. And this is the territory of the second and third noble truth, the cause of clinging and the cessation of clinging. The undermining of ignorance is that awareness. Ignorance, avijja, avidya in Sanskrit, or marikpa in Tibetan. It's not knowing, not understanding, not seeing. So vidya or vidya or rigpa is knowing, awareness, seeing. So seeing with wisdom, seeing clearly. And this is the dispelling of ignorance, the opposite of ignorance, which collapses the process of dependent origination, and the being experiences freedom from that, cessation of suffering. But anything clung to is dukkha. So clinging to anything that's impermanent as permanent is dukkha. As me, as a real me, a solid me, a lasting me, that's dukkha. Because the me, even when me is present, it's a very changing me. You cannot sustain a permanent actual reality, a permanent sense of me, because me just arises from clinging to any of these sense experiences, any of these khandhas, this body, thought forms, feelings, perceptions, sense consciousness. And these are all changing. So the me that clings to them is also very changing experiences. That's why who am I really? Where's the real me? Will the real me please stand up? And then in our investigation, we find there is no real me. It's just a process of identifying with different experiences. And when you learn how to float, not cling, you don't have to identify with any of it, but you don't have to push any of it away. And the masters tell us that full realization is the recognition of, let me see. One of them said, you live in a world of illusion and appearances of things. There is a reality. You are that reality. When you understand this, you see that you are nothing. And being nothing, everything. So ironically, the letting go, the non-clinging to things, changeable, conditioned, impermanent things, brings you to an experience of, there's different words to describe it, unity or oneness or transcendence or non-dual reality where there's no separation, not two, not separate, not even oneness, because that implies a possible two-ness. There's just the mind not creating other or two, or it's just suchness, non-separation. That's why the Master stopped talking about it at that point. It's beyond description, because any description, Jenny, becomes true but not right, right but not true, because it cannot ever really describe transcendent reality. Nevertheless, it can be realized and experienced. But we just have to recognize the limitations of words and concepts in and of themselves. They are those conditioned factors. So, William, I hope that helps. Of course, recognizing the three characteristics is across the board in our everyday life and in our meditation practice. We just don't make a difference between the two, because this is experience per se. Every experience has the mark of anicca, dukkha, anatta, but I'm not recognizing it. Means that we're usually clinging. The non-recognition means that the habit pattern maintained by ignorance is usually in play. Some kind of clinging or identification. So I hope that helps. I'm struggling with how to deal with a mood or feeling that feels separate from thoughts and seems to be held in my body. Yeah, so it may have been helpful for you to hear what I was saying earlier about the mind states, moods, and emotions. It's not like a moment of discursive thought where you hear the thought move through the mind. It's a mood, like a slow-moving weather pattern, but we can recognize it. The mind is, or the heart is affected by aversion. The Buddha encourages, this is the territory of the third foundation of mindfulness of mind itself. He encourages us to recognize when the mind is affected by lobha, dosa, or moha, greed, hatred, or delusion. So those three are the basics, but there's many different flavors of those three. Now, often as modern people, for example, some of the more common moods we can feel are, say, depression or anxiety, fear. Obviously, we can have a happy mood or a sad mood, melancholic mood. So these are moods, these are also conditions of mind. So we're encouraged to recognize them, breathe with them, notice the reactivity that emerges out of them. They're like tints, they're like dyes in the water of the mind. Like if we have a mood of that's affected by desire, sometimes it's stimulating the mind, but it's like a red dye or a pink dye in the water, and everything that is experienced, or other experiences while that mood is present, can be tainted by that dye, red dye, which in this analogy is desire. Or if it's a dark blue dye, when we're feeling depressed or even angry, any sense impressions that enter the mind can be tainted by that dye and appear more threatening or moody, or create more reactivity than what that actually is. We're not really seeing reality as it is, but experiences are mixing in with that dyed water. So to come to know the moods of the mind is really important. And I really like the analogy of the weather. You wake up and it's dark and cloudy and drizzly. Kind of a metaphor for depressed mood or sad mood. Or maybe it's stormy, and wild winds, a bit of analogy for more anger or reactivity. To be able to recognize, okay, this is the weather. The weather isn't always like this. These are changing patterns that come and go according to other causes and conditions. If you can remember, even if it's a few days, stormy, windy, rain or grey, drizzly, we can still generally remember that the sun, the open sky is there, and these are weather patterns moving through. We know that the sun will come out again, the sky will clear. But when we get trapped in those moods, often we just think through this clinging process. This is me, this is mine, this is what I am, this is what I always was, this is what I always will be. I'm such a hopeless case. This is a shitty place to be. I don't want to be here. And then, we're just caught in a lot of reactivity and identification, and that makes our experience even more painful, creates more suffering, the identification. I am this, poor me. And we struggle and we fight and we push and carry on. If we can remember this is just the weather at the moment and breathe with it. And even if we can't see that clear sky, we can sense it, we can intuit it. We know this pattern, this weather pattern will pass. And with that clarity, it can pass far more quickly because we're not identifying, or at least we're identifying less, and we're not immediately just reacting out of it. We've got a perspective on it. We know this too will pass. And so we engage in a more aware and careful way, and it generally passes more quickly. So I hope that helps. Yeah, so when you're saying the feelings feel separate from thoughts, seem to be held within the body. Exactly, that's the sense of it. There's moods and emotions are definitely body felt. They're interacting with thoughts and concepts all the time. So they're co-conditioned, but you do feel them in the body. So that's a good place to be mindful. Where do I feel this mood or particular sensation of depression or anger or desire, whatever it is, anxiety? Where do I feel it in the body? This is my approach to bringing awareness to right where the sense of suffering is emerging, or sense of limitation appears to be, and breathing with that. Allowing expansive awareness. We're not pushing away. By allowing observation, breathing with awareness, we're actually dissolving the glue, the stickiness, the attachment, just through that awareness, observation, and breathing with it in the moment. So we're not conceptualizing it, we're really right there with it. And we're able to just, the body in this process, the body is, and mind, but only the body is integrating the experience. So it's no longer a stuck pattern that we keep getting locked into. It's starting to disperse and integrate. Sometimes there's those stuck patterns due to trauma or painful experience in the past. So this can take a little bit of working through, but the principle is the same, with awareness and trusting in that process. And of course, the attitude of kindness and compassion with whatever's arising. And just in case you didn't know, my meditations on our website called Embodying Awareness and Kindness really address in very brief, direct meditations how to move through and work with this territory. I feel there is some wisdom to be gained through extreme physical exertion. I asked an ultra runner the spiritual wisdom she gained from running 100-mile races, and she said patience. Yeah, Buddhist virtue. Absolutely. Well, I think similarly within any discipline, uh, when you look at people who excel in their particular fields, you know, what they have to learn the skill of anything from carpentry to playing musical instruments to athletics to learning any skill in life. It's a process, and it does take patience, because at first we may not be very good at it. You develop muscles, you develop skill, mental, physical, emotional muscles, whatever it is. And it's exactly the same with the meditative spiritual practice path. It does require patience, but in the process, it may feel, that like you're really awkward at this, you can't do it. But the more you do something, the more skilled you get at it, the more you're able to develop or use different tools. If I sometimes use this analogy of, say, and it's used actually in the Buddhist sutras about a wood turner. A wood turner who turns various types of wood, legs for tables and chairs and fancy bits of wood, and a big chunk of wood spins, and they use different tools to carve out different parts of the wood to make beautiful shapes. A whole range of tools, but at first you start to use them, you have the idea, yeah, this is what I want to do, but you're really clunky with it, and you mess up the wood, but eventually you learn the subtlety of how to use each tool and get those really refined movements. And this learning only comes through experience. So yeah, you really need patience. And the Buddha himself said, patience, it depends on the translation, patience is the highest virtue, or patience is the most supreme ascetic practice or supreme spiritual discipline. Exactly for those reasons. So there's so much to be learned for us in that. So yes, thanks for bringing that up. Don't know mind. Also, he said, David Goggins said, every 24-hour race is worth 5 years of life experience. I believe the mind drops away all the unnecessary mental baggage in order to finish the race. It holds you back. Well, there you go. Yeah. So that's when you're really focused on one activity, and this is a very physically demanding activity. You cannot waste your energy in thinking about other things. You have to be really focused, really, really focused. So yeah, that's a perfect example. But in that incredible focus, a lot of baggage can be dropped. Now, you can learn from that experience or not, in terms of you can transfer the wisdom of that experience across the whole of your life or not. It depends on the scope of your wisdom, whether this person or other people who run the 100-mile races can transfer that wisdom through the whole of their life or not. That's the real skill. Sounds like this person, through the way he's reflecting, can. Great, thank you. Someone there has given the link for Dependent Origination, the book that I mentioned. Thanks very much for that. Yes, and the subtitle, Dependent Origination, the Buddhist Law of Conditionality. Very good. It's a very, very good book if you want to do a deep dive into what dependent origination is pointing to. But that's an example. We can write. Then there's probably many, many, many books and theses in existence describing dependent origination. But as Ajahn Chah said, you can know it in a moment of falling in your practice from the experience of suffering, from ignorance to suffering, or from letting go to freedom. That's where the truth of it is. All of those words in all of those books you'll ever find, or any teacher has ever said, is the packaging, the finger pointing to the moon. So the words are helpful. Don't get stuck on the words. Let them point you to what has to be realized. Very good. Yeah, words can only reveal the color used. The painting has to be seen in its totality. That's right. Or how do you describe the taste of a banana? You can describe it in many words, but to really know it, you have to eat it, taste it yourself. Do we have personal help from the energy realm in our spiritual journey? Is it of any use to invoke help in terms of removing confusion and bringing clarity? Well, this is what you're describing is what's the essence of what's called prayer, isn't it? Kind of asking for help or being open to help, even if you don't ask, being open to help. So to me, the essence of this, what you're asking, is openness of mind. And a humility of mind, which is connected to this openness, this non-conceptual openness, which is free of arrogance and I-ness, me-ness, mine-ness, that can receive receptivity. It's a beautiful, I'm reminded of something that Mother Teresa is reported to have said when she was being interviewed once. And someone asked her, when you pray, what do you say to God? And she said, nothing. I just listen. And they said, well, what does he say to you? And she said, nothing. I just listen. Did I get that story right? I say nothing. He just listens. That's right. What do you say? He just listens. God just listens. What does God say to you? Nothing. I just listen. So there's this open listening. In traditional prayer, you might put some words out like, please help me, or I'm open to receive guidance. May all the benevolent forces in the universe show me the way. So this asking is actually coming from a place of humility, because we find ourselves at a point where I can't do it, right? And in many different paradigms or ways, we realize this is actually the bottoming out moment where you realize I can't do it. I need help. This is actually a good place to come to, because the mind becomes humble and open. You've been push, 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 push. Can't do it. Open the mind. And within that openness and humility and receptivity, so much can occur. So much can be received and open to. It's just in the nature. That wisdom is already in the nature of the universe, the nature of the mind, to be received. Whether we conceive of it as something from some other energy realm, or God, or bodhisattvas, or other beings, whether we perceive or conceive of it as that. And there are so many stories about the power of prayer, But ultimately, I find that drilling down to the essence is in that open awareness with humility, receptivity, that wisdom, compassion, freedom can emerge or be found. The Buddha said, after he was awakened, he said, the doors to the deathless are open. If you can hear this, trust this. Or another translation, those who can hear this, bring forth your faith. There's many different ways that could be construed. But when he said the doors to the deathless are open, I sense that he was saying they're always open. There are no closed doors that you have to find or find a way through. Doors to the deathless are open. Finding a way to let the mind rest and discover that openness and transcendent beingness. And Rumi, in one of his beautiful poems, said something like, I paraphrase because I can't remember exactly, I was knocking at the door to let me in. And then I realized I'd been knocking on the inside. I'd been knocking from the inside. So there you have it in another way expressed, very different words and sentiments in the same way the Buddha said the doors to the deathless are open. There's that transference or the shift of understanding from feeling like you're alone and isolated on the outside, trying to get to be accepted, to be allowed in to heaven or to the divine. And then the awakening is realizing you've just been knocking from the inside. You're already there. That transcendent emergence of the transcendence or the discovery of that transcendent reality. As I said earlier, that non-separation, the already free awareness, which is all-inclusive, all-aware, unbounded, timeless. It's all in the shift of perspective, or the letting go of clinging, or the disappearance of clinging, or the undermining of ignorance, the full awakening, whichever way you want to describe it, there is that. And that is probably a good place to draw this session to a close, because I'm at the end of my questions and it's nearly 9 o'clock, so we're nearly on 2 hours. So thank you all for all those great questions, and I hope that my attempts at explanation and the words I offered were helpful. I often feel afterwards that I may have misunderstood a question, so just, backdating for all the times if I may have misunderstood someone's question and not responded in the most direct way, but I trust that there's something to be learned within all of that. So let's draw today's session to a close, and we're coming to the end of the year, so Samaneri Jayasara will do the next session in 3 weeks' time, which will be the 22nd, just before Christmas. And then we'll take a couple months break. And so I wish you all the very, very best over this Christmas, New Year period that's upcoming. Stay safe, stay well. Really bring forth the heart of gratitude and kindness and compassion And that in itself will carry you on the journey and will bring so much benefit to all those around you and everyone in the world. So, all blessings to each and every one of you, and I look forward to connecting with you again next year. Okay, take care. Bye for now.